morning. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Kristen Sonday, and I'm here today because I'm one of the tech entrepreneurs working to close that justice gap. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I am originally a first-generation college Latina from New Jersey and was lucky enough to attend Princeton, where they really stress public service. After Princeton, I was able to land an incredible job at the US Justice Department doing international criminal work in Mexico and Central America. I spent some time down in Mexico City, and working at DOJ allowed me to explore firsthand how complicated our judicial system is. It's hard enough if you speak English and you're not a lawyer, and if you don't, it felt near impossible. I saw so many people struggling, and that's when I knew I wanted to do something around access to justice. I decided not to go to law school, but joined the founding team of a tech company based in New York. But the real reason I'm here today is because of Eduardo. Eduardo was a local politician in his hometown in Colombia, and he and his family were being threatened by a local narco-guerrilla group. They feared for their lives and fled to the United States seeking refuge. Like millions of Americans, Eduardo could not afford a lawyer. They were here for a few years, and his visa was about to expire, and the government had started deportation proceedings. He didn't know where to turn. And luckily, my co-founder, Felicity Conrad, was able to step in with the support of her law firm to take on his case pro bono. She ended up winning asylum for him and his family and changing his life, and ultimately changing hers, because that's what inspired her to leave the large law firm and come work with me on Paladin. Eduardo's story is not an exception. In the past year alone, between the DACA termination announcement, the natural disasters, opioid crisis, we've seen hundreds of thousands, if not millions of individuals affected by urgent legal issues, and the majority of whom can't afford a lawyer either. But we're in this era, this weird paradox, in that we're building more technology now than ever before. I mean, our houses are smart, cars are starting to drive themselves, you can order anything on demand, you can ask conference questions from an app on your phone. And yet, with all of this new legal technology, the justice gap continues to widen. And so I wanted to explore why that is, who's working on these issues and what can we do about it? So I did some research, and the good news is that we are working on it. And I broke it down into 5 different groups that are working to address access to justice, leveraging technology. So the first group, of course, is LSC. And they have their incredible TIG grants that have really helped increase capacity for local legal aid organizations to take on new clients. The second is nonprofits. So there's a group in New York, Blue Ridge Labs, that does an incredible job of incubating new nonprofits that focus specifically on certain areas of law to help those in need. The third area is fellowships. So you're probably familiar with the ABA Center for Innovation Fellowship, which is based here in Chicago. Another great example is Stanford's Codex program. And they bring on fellows for a year or two to work on access to justice issues, develop legal tech applications, and then move on from there. The fourth is school programs. So I've been really encouraged by the number of law schools that have recently started innovation programs. Chicago Kent down the road is another really great example. Legal R&D over at Michigan State is another great school that's been incorporating these practices into the classroom. And I think we're going to see a lot of new innovation coming out of students at these schools and others. And the last is access to justice specific technology companies. So what I'm really excited about for this group, which includes Paladin, is that we're using a for-profit model to build access to justice tech that can be long-term sustainable and scalable without having to rely on grants or external funding. Okay, so who's working on these issues? So as someone who comes from an underserved community and one that's disproportionately affected by the justice gap, which includes women, immigrants, and minorities, I feel pretty strongly that these groups should have a voice at the table, if not really lead the way in developing these tech solutions to solve these issues. So I wanted to understand how we were represented among legal technology in general and then access to justice more specifically. So there was no existing diversity in legal tech data set. So I did what every entrepreneur would do and built my own. So I ended up compiling lists from Stanford Codex, from AngelList, from Bob Ambrogi, from Evolve the Law, and came up with a list of hundreds of legal technology startups. After culling them to figure out which ones were still operational, which sadly was below half, taking out ones that weren't side projects or US-based, and really getting a sense of which ones were working on legal tech-specific issues, I came up with about 269 companies. I then went through each and every company's webpage. I went to their Crunchbase profiles, LinkedIn, personal bios of the founders, and was able to identify 478 founders across these companies working on legal tech. Two things really stood out to me in looking at an analysis of all of these founders and their backgrounds, mostly figuring out how they self-identified. The first is that there's a significant lack of representation from diverse communities within the legal tech community at large. The second is that there's a significant lack of focus by legal tech on problems that affect access to justice. So let's just start with women. 2017 was the self-proclaimed year of the woman in legal tech, right? We saw unprecedented acquisitions, promotions, awards, prizes, lists. It seemed great. Unfortunately, the data doesn't actually support this so much. Women make up only about 14% of legal technology founders, and that's below the tech industry standard of around 17%. Keep in mind that women make up over 50% of the population, and there are now more women enrolled in law school than there are men. On the diversity side, things are also looking kind of bad. So diverse founders overall make up a little over a quarter of all founders. Black entrepreneurs make up about 2%, and Latinx only about 3%. Okay, so why is this bad? Miguel Willis, who is the executive director of the Access to Justice Tech Fellows, puts this really well. He says that when you have groups of people building technology solutions for communities of which they're not a part, they're highly susceptible to design biases. We all know how we interact with and use our phones and technology on a daily basis, but we really need to understand how others who don't even know necessarily that their issue is a legal one, how they're learning about it, educating themselves, figuring out where to go for solutions, and then being able to absorb and use that technology in a really impactful way. So we need to make sure that we're bringing a number of diverse perspectives to the table to create solutions that are well-rounded and thoughtful when we think about longer-term implementation. The second is that I'm worried that they're not going to reach the right users. Something that concerns me a bit in legal tech is that we tend to build solutions in silos. So we'll have firms working on technology or companies or law schools, but I don't know to the extent that they're actually getting out into these communities and understanding how to actually deliver these services. It's one thing to have a new app live on an ABA website, but if the people who are intended to use it don't know it's there or don't know what the ABA is, it's going to be really hard to make that scalable and actually have the impact that we're striving for. So what are we building as a legal tech community? So I decided to do a quick breakdown to figure out what we're building across these 270-ish companies. Maybe not surprisingly, the practice management and case management software bucket was the largest at about 25-ish%, followed by projects such as IP and patent management, litigation support, contract automation, and I was shocked at how many matching marketplaces there were for lawyers and clients. And there are actually 2x the number of matching marketplaces as there are straight-up legal technology companies addressing access to justice. A2J makes up about 4% overall of these companies, and immigration is another 4%. So combined, we're looking at less than 10% of all of our legal tech efforts being directed towards underserved communities. So who are these founders? So just doing another level below quick analysis, I studied and realized that 24% of Black and Latinx founders are working on A2J. which is a decent representation. 12% of women overall were working on access to justice, and only about 14% of minorities overall. If we flip that though, about 44%, so nearly half of these A to J focused companies do have a diverse founder at the helm, which again is crucial for having their voices heard and having these companies ultimately be successful. So what can we do about this? So the first solution I would recommend is to start early. So as I mentioned, we're seeing a ton of law schools developing innovation programs, access to justice initiatives, and I would encourage them to take it one step further outside of their comfort zone. Let's get into these communities that really need the help. Let's go to churches, let's go to community centers, let's go to medical centers, and really understand what these legal issues are. Let's talk to people about how they engage with technology and build solutions based off of that. The second is co-developing and buy-in. So there are a number of firms that are increasingly developing investment arms and innovation arms to get more involved with the legal tech community and startups in particular. These firms are not only investing in technology companies that they think will impact their work both at the firm, on the client side, and in the community, but they're also literally sitting down and co-developing with tech startups to figure out, what are the best practices that we can share? What can we learn from these technologists? And how can we develop the best well-rounded product to increase the delivery of our services at the firm and beyond? And the last is donating. So as an individual, and especially because underrepresented founders are significantly underrepresented also in legal technology, it's really important for these communities and tech groups to have mentorship and gain advice as to how to navigate the legal space, and then also to make sure that we're incorporating all the best practices and learnings that they've had over the years to build the most impactful tech that we can. So I would encourage you to reach out. I'm actually going to crowdsource this list, open source it at some point. And if you see a company or a founder that looks particularly interesting, reach out and donate your time or your advice. You can also angel invest if there's a company that looks especially promising to you, and if you qualify, put your money where your mouth is and make sure that these companies can be successful longer term and they can get back to focusing on the actual build. In the meantime, technology is not really your thing, and that's okay. We can all do more pro bono. If every person in this room took on one more pro bono case this year than they had originally planned, we could help 400 additional people in the state of Illinois. And that's really powerful. And that's something that only you guys can do. So, as someone navigating the system myself and trying to gain as many perspectives and inputs as I can to build a really powerful tool to help decrease this justice gap, I would welcome a conversation later. Any questions, feedback, or ideas can be reached at Kristen at Join Paladin. And I thank you so much for your time.